In 1985, America will replace the standard issue sidearm for the military to meet NATO STANAG requirements, and after 5 years of testing, this is what they got. The Beretta 92, aka the M9, is the 9mm handgun that replaced the .45 Colt M1911 as a standard issue sidearm for the United States military. With a slightly controversial history with the military, the Beretta has proven to be a reliable pistol able to meet the needs of both law enforcement and military service in the 21st century. The
Valtrompia.
region has been mined for iron since the Roman Empire, becoming an industrial powerhouse for anything involving iron in Italy. And in this region, the village of
Gardone.
a small forge known as the Beretta Forge would get started with its first recorded contract for 185 arquebus barrels on October 3rd, 1526, meaning that Beretta has been making guns and gun accessories for almost 500 years. So what did you get him for the 500th birthday? Because I didn't get him shit because I don't have Facebook to remind me of birthdays like everyone else. So Beretta would keep making gun barrels, becoming the second largest gun barrel maker in Gardone in the 17th century. And as to who the largest was, we don't have any publicly available records that say who the largest was, only the second largest. They would continue to make gun barrels till the mid-1800s when Giuseppe Antonio Beretta would take over the now 300-year-old family company of designing gun barrels and start making their own firearms. After this, his son Pietro would further improve the company by modernizing it and creating their first semi-auto pistol, the Beretta Model 15, and starting the Beretta that we know today. This pistol would immediately enter service with the Royal Italian Army all the way through World War II. They would keep making small arms for Italy, becoming their primary contract for both the military and the police, along with building up a nice line of sporting arms. And so from 1961 to 1971, they would expand their business out of Italy into Europe to sell sporting arms in places like France, Greece, and Great Britain, and they would also open up a factory all the way in Brazil to start their reach across the ocean. After this, they made an incredibly bold decision to start printing money by expanding into the United States by creating Beretta USA in 1977 to introduce the US to Beretta's lineup of sporting arms. Before Beretta USA was formed in 1975, their engineers would put their heads together and create their best pistol yet, the Beretta 92. The 92 would enter production the following year, and a lot of countries would pick it up throughout the course of its development. They would continue to improve the 92, creating the 92S in 1978 to meet the requirements of some police forces by adding a slide-mounted safety and a decocking lever, with the S in the name standing for sicurezza, meaning safety or security in reference to the now improved safety. Then Beretta would throw their hat into the ring when the United States Air Force started the Joint Service Small Arms Program to coordinate weapon standardization between the various United States military service branches in 1978 after a congressional investigation found that they had an estimated 25 different pistols in their inventory. So Beretta would make the 92S-1 for the first round of trials, and this version had an ambidextrous safety levers, a 3-dot iron sights, and relocated the mag release catch from the bottom of the grip to the lower bottom of the trigger guard where it would be seen on later variants. After being adopted for service, the name would get updated to the 92SB for Sicurezza Blocco, meaning safety block, referring to the internal firing pin block to add another layer of safety to the gun. Even though the Beretta performed the best during the testing, the Army did not like the results of the tests, as the M1911s they were using had a failure every 748 rounds. This is in stark contrast to the original 1911 tests where they easily went through 6,000 rounds without a single failure, with the reports saying that the mags for the 1911s were defective, causing the poor performance. The Army saw this and decided to invalidate all the testing the Air Force had done and decided to conduct their own series of tests. The Army would conduct their tests from 1981 to 1982, and they would come to the conclusion the Army, in its role as Defense Department Executive Agent for 9mm handgun procurement, has canceled the procurement. It was not possible to make an award because the submitted weapon samples substantially failed to meet the essential requirements contained in the procurement solicitation. The Department of Defense intends to re-examine its requirements for a new handgun, and they would cancel all procurements for the 92 SB. This wasn't received well because the United States still hadn't standardized a handgun to meet the NATO requirements, so they had to do a third round of testing. The third round of testing went from 1983 to 1984, known as the XM9 trials, and would be the final round of tests, with the two best designs from this competition being the Beretta 92 SB-F, which is a further modified version of the 92S, and 6 Hour's P226, a pistol that was designed from the ground up for these trials. The P226 would perform slightly better than the 92, but would ultimately lose in the final round of bidding, making the Beretta the new standard issue pistol for the military on January 14th, 1985, with it being adopted as the M9 or the 92F, with the F standing for Federale, meaning federal, with the later M9A1 being adopted by the Marine Corps in 2006. In 1987, the General Accounting Office reported an incident where the slide failed on a 92 SB and injured a member of the Naval Special Warfare Group. This was followed by 2 more injuries during further testing. These failures were seen in both military and civilian Beretta models with very high round counts. After an investigation, Beretta deemed them to be the result of ammunition supplied by the US Army, which exceeded the recommended pressures specified by NATO. The Army, on the other hand, concluded that the faults were the result of low metal toughness present in the Italian-made slides. After this, a modification for the M9 to prevent slide failures was made, after which no further slide fractures were reported, but the damage to the reputation was already done, and it was going to get a lot worse from here. Later in 2006, the Center for Naval Analysis released a report about small arms in combat. In this report, the CNA would conduct a survey on 2,608 troops returning from Iraq and Afghanistan over a 12-month period. Of the troops interviewed, only 161 or 6% had actually used the M9 in combat. Those troops would report 58% were satisfied with the M9's performance, the lowest satisfaction rate of the entire survey, with 63% satisfied with its durability to not break or need repairs, the lowest level of confidence in the survey again. 74% of users would give out recommendations on how to improve the M9. 26% of them would request a larger caliber or a round with better stopping power, and 20% of them would flat out request for a new pistol entirely. Problems would continue to plague the M9 as in 2007, soldiers out in the field would continue to report the 9mm ball ammunition's lack of stopping power. Then even more controversy would strike as major problems with the M9's magazines would arise. The military decided not to use the mags made by Beretta and went with a third-party contractor known as Airtronic USA. Airtronic wouldn't be at fault for the magazines after testing, and testimony from troops found that the failure was with the heavy phosphate finish requested by the government contract that did not interact well with the Iraqi environment. Because of this, Airtronic would have to make over 2 million new magazines to replace the old ones with the phosphate finish. All of this combined permanently tarnished the M9's reputation with the military, and it wouldn't be long until they wanted to replace it. In 2011, the Army and Air Force would announce the Modular Handgun Systems competition, and after multiple delays, and testing would finally begin in 2016. Even though Beretta made the M9A3 to try and replace the current M9s in service via an engineering change proposal, the Army would say that it is cheaper to buy a new pistol than replace the current ones in service. So Beretta would not submit the M9 for the new competition, instead they would submit the APX pistol. The competition would end on January 19th, 2017, with SIG's P320 winning the contract and adopting it as the M17, or with the compact version designated the M18. And if you know anything about the M17, you would know that it's an even deeper controversy than the M9 ever was, and added on top of this with Glock saying that SIG's design was chosen before the testing could even be carried out. Some M9s would still remain in service with select groups in the military and police forces, with Beretta making the M9A4 in 2021 to further improve the M9 design. Meaning that even when attempting to replace the pistol that caused a lot of controversy from its adoption over 40 years ago by replacing the M1911, and throughout its service history by needing repairs and replacement parts, it tops it all off by having a controversial exit and an even more controversial replacement. Due to the previously mentioned issues, if you know anything about the M9 or have used the M9 in service, you know it is always jamming up in use. With it being so bad that some people will report the M9 jamming on anything or absolutely nothing. Combine this with how some grunts would treat the M9 when they have it, that being, if it's not a hammer, why is it hammer shaped when they need to hammer in tent pegs? Don't lie to me, we all know that happened a little too often without enough maintenance in between cases. And if you somehow don't know it as a jamming problem, you probably know it as a starter pistol in any games from the early 2000s that tried to depict modern warfare. It was the standard issue sidearm for the US military at the time, so if you were playing as the United States and didn't have an M9, it was just weird. Even though the M9 has a long list of controversy, it was still a quality pistol for both civilian and police forces. Even when it failed to be the pistol that the US military needed, it still found its way into many militaries and police forces across the world, proving that the oldest firearm company still knows what it's doing over 500 years later. And that was the history of the Beretta M9. But hey, I'm H. Consider subscribing.